This talk is going to be less about GIS and mapping functionality and a little bit more about what it means to be able to streamline information through a mapping system that is interactive. I'm here to talk about the Invasive Species Database, and just to set a context a little bit. Globally, invasive species are one of the greatest threats to biodiversity. They also have a significant economic cost, with the cost of impact and control at over 12 billion for Europe and 1.7 billion for Britain. Therefore, it makes sense that there is a need to know what invasive species do we have and where exactly are they. When we think about it, they can impact on exacerbating flooding, on food web interactions, on recreation of water areas, which can impact on tourism, and impact on our native wildlife. So in light of this, the National Biodiversity Data Centre in 2008 established a National Invasive Species Database. The aim was to establish a centralised source of distribution data on invasive species in Ireland. Currently, there are over 25,000 records, this distribution data, for 98 invasive species in Ireland. The species lists in the database come from risk assessment and expert contribution. And importantly, the distribution data on this occurrence data comes from a variety of sources, whether it be state body monitoring programs, from consultancies, from academia or journals. And this can be fed through different sources into an interactive mapping system and viewed in one go. You can access the database through its online portal at invasives.biodiversityireland.ie. When you go in there, you can query and you can view and query the list of invasive species, and for each one, see a profile with important information on each of those species. When was it first recorded in Ireland? What is its main mechanism of impact, etc. You can also access the distribution data from all these different sources on one map. And as Liam showed earlier in his talk, you have that record data. To expand a little bit on that, it's not about just viewing it against a background of different layers, but you can also download lists. You can, draw a polygon. You might be interested in what about a development in an area. And you want to see, are there any of these high impact invasives in it that need to be considered for development? Draw your polygon and download your list, and it'll tell you if it's there, along with other threatened or protected species. But since its establishment in 2008, the functionality of it has gone far beyond, and the functions that we do in the initiative have gone far beyond its initial aim. We also work on many other aspects, and this is really as a result for the need for information and data on invasive species, both in Ireland and internationally. We work with global and regional networks. Information is provided from the data centre, who's a national node for contributing record data to the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, where record species are tagged. We also provide data to NOBANIS, which is a European invasive alien species network. Data provision is very important also within Ireland. It's supplied to local authorities, it's supplied for research, for many other different aspects. We do this through hard copy reports, we can provide GIS files, and really it's just about answering queries as well. Importantly, and very importantly, it's also about building capacity. And we undertake many training workshops throughout the year. We deliver targeted recording schemes and work on an awareness of invasive species and the recording of them. Significantly, we have also developed an early warning system for invasive alien species in Ireland. Now, this is crucial, because failing to prevent the introduction of an invasive species to Ireland, we need to detect its presence and warn of its arrival as early as possible. This allows for a rapid response to go in and to remove that species and to remove the threat of it before it becomes established and spread. So just as one example of how this early warning system will work, in August in 2010, I received some sighting information and a photograph of a chipmunk species seen in Colligan Woods in Dungarvan, County Waterford. And the work I do on that record and every other ones, you check the details of the record. Is all the minimum required information there? Is it valid? We also looked at the photo properties and spoke to the recorder. When we're happy in the data centre that this seems like a valid record, the photograph was sent to an expert to identify the species. That was Dr. Colin Lawton in NUI Galway, and he came back and said, well, this is a Siberian chipmunk, Tamias sibericus, which happens to be one of the most commonly traded chipmunk species. We knew from the risk assessment, we could look up, we now knew what the species was, that the impact of this is most likely to be on direct competition for resources with our native red squirrel, which is already under pressure from habitat loss and another invasive species, the grey squirrel. So what did we do? We issued an invasive species alert. We issued this to a network of alert people and also to the media to make everybody aware of it. It got great coverage. Some of it was indeed very questionable, but coverage is coverage. But what's the benefit of that again? Well, it created greater vigilance. People knew what to look out for, what information was required if they saw this species, and where to submit it to. That resulted in 6 additional records being verified. So what's next for the invasive species database? I'll only touch on a few elements here. What we would love to see is an automated early warning system. This has been scoped, the functionality required for it, but funding hasn't yet been received to develop it. And really what it is to detect what the eye can't see for occurrences in smaller environmental or administrative areas. So for instance, with the chipmunk, the first record or the first 10 records, it's easy to know with the eye when that's mapped, oh, that's the first record for that area. It's not so easy, but it's just important to know, is that species first recorded in, say, a local authority or within a nature conservation value area? And this can happen, you could imagine, for Japanese knotweed or any other important aquatic or terrestrial invasive species. So this system would allow that to happen. It would detect at different levels of criteria, first to Ireland, first to this region, whatever it may be. It would issue the alerts automatically to a website, and it would issue alerts via RSS feeds to an alert network who can sign up for it. We're also working in a phased way through producing reports on trends and introductions of invasive species in Ireland and to Ireland. And this is important. It can indicate what has been happening, and that can indicate what's likely to happen into the future. We'll look at horizon scanning, and that can help direct policy and actions. For instance, what is the main pathways for certain species coming in, and do we need to undertake biosecurity there? Boats coming into the country, washed at ports. And finally, it is also important and imperative for all the work that we do there to remain to do the foundation and the fundamental work of the data centre, promoting recording of the species, providing a facility where people can submit their sightings, where they can be validated, where the identity can be verified, and all those verified records put into that centralised mapping system for researchers, for local authorities, for consultancies, whoever need to access that information for their use. And just to say, in the future, we are looking at a time where invasive species are becoming a lot more prominent, and there is certainly significant developments in policy and legislation, both in Ireland, in Europe, and globally. Oh, apologies. So thank you very much. The website, you can go there for more information and to access the database. You can contact me in the data centre. And I just want to also say thanks to the EPA and the Heritage Council for their continued funding.